When America stepped back, China stepped in. What was once a US-dominated global stage is now Beijing's opportunity to rewrite the rules, starting with the United Nations. That shift didn't happen overnight. It was triggered by a decision, one that echoed across every international hall, chamber, and treaty room. In 2017, Donald Trump entered office with a clear promise: America first. It resonated with millions of Americans, but on the global stage, it signaled something else: America alone. Trump withdrew the US from major international agreements, the Paris Climate Accord, the Iran nuclear deal, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And when it came to the United Nations, his administration pulled the US out of UNESCO, the Human Rights Council, and slashed funding to critical UN bodies, including the World Health Organization during a pandemic. For a country that had led the construction of the post-World War II international order, these moves were seismic. They weren't just policy changes, they were a strategic withdrawal from global leadership. And in international relations, when a superpower steps back, someone else fills the vacuum. That someone was China. Under President Xi Jinping, China saw an opening, not just to participate in global institutions, but to reshape them. Beijing ramped up its contributions to the UN. It began winning leadership positions in key UN agencies, the International Telecommunication Union, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, bodies that regulate critical global standards in everything from 5G to food security. But China wasn't just playing by the rules. It was editing them. In human rights forums, Chinese diplomats increasingly inserted language emphasizing state sovereignty over universal rights. In UN peacekeeping, China deployed more personnel than any other permanent Security Council member, while also using its leverage to mute criticism of its domestic policies, especially in Xinjiang and Hong Kong. It used aid diplomacy during the COVID-19 crisis, delivering masks, vaccines, and infrastructure to struggling nations, often through channels where Western influence had receded. In effect, Beijing started building a version of multilateralism that leaned on its own values: authoritarian stability, non-interference, and economic dependency. Now here's the irony. The very institutions the US helped create after World War II, to promote democracy, rule of law, and liberal order, were now being used by a rival power to promote an alternative model. A model where economic power replaces democratic legitimacy. Where silence on rights is exchanged for financial support. And where global governance becomes a vehicle for national strategy. This wasn't entirely new. In fact, history offers a clear parallel. After World War II, it was the United States that filled the void left by a devastated Europe. The US used the Marshall Plan, the Bretton Woods system, and the United Nations itself to institutionalize its values globally. The goal was peace through integration, prosperity through cooperation, and freedom through diplomacy. Now, decades later, China is following a similar path, but with very different ends. And with US credibility damaged by years of withdrawal, infighting, and shifting policies, Washington's return to global diplomacy has been met with skepticism. Yes, the Biden administration tried to re-engage, rejoining the Paris Agreement, recommitting to NATO, and returning to UN forums. But the world had changed. Allies had adapted. And China had grown more entrenched. The real question now isn't whether China is a part of the international system, it's whether it's quietly leading it in areas that matter most. Technology standards, trade regulations, development aid, health governance, and even the narrative of global leadership itself. This power shift at the United Nations is not just about seats or votes. It's about ideas. Which values will guide the next century of international cooperation? Who will set the norms that affect billions of lives? And how does the West respond when its own institutions become tools of a rising rival? The UN, once a symbol of US-led unity, is now a battleground for influence, one where presence matters more than promises, and engagement beats nostalgia. Because in geopolitics, as in nature, vacuums don't last. They get filled. And while America debated, disengaged, and turned inward, China didn't wait. It stepped in.